Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Thought Sparks podcast with Rita McGrath, where I interview fascinating people who have great ideas, have written books, have started companies, some who have done all of the above. And this week's guest, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Don Tapscott, who I'm pleased to call something of a friend and certainly someone I've worked with for many, many, many years. And so, Don, welcome.
Great to be here, as it were.
Yeah, pleasure. Might be here, wherever here is, which is actually very germane to the theme of your book. So we're going to be talking about Don's book, You to the Power of Two. I have a digital copy. I don't have a physical copy. But before we even get to the book, the new book, which I just do want to talk about, I first met you, if memory serves me, at a conference that was co-chaired by C.K. Prahalad and Gary Hamel for the Strategic Management Society. And this would have been early 90s, something like that. And you were one of the featured speakers, and you were getting up and talking about how technology was going to enable like your refrigerator to know when it was empty and for you to change your toaster settings remotely. And this was before we had smartphones. This was before we had the internet as we know it. And I remember listening to you and thinking, does this guy have a crystal ball? This is just so out there. So I remember being like super impressed. And then over the years, we've sort of bumped into each other at various conferences. And one of so many things that have made such a big impression, but one of the things you did, I think, early on was really got regular people talking about blockchain, which I thought was a major accomplishment. And now you've taken that to the next step, getting regular people to talk about agentic AI. Identic AI, which I think is really interesting. So maybe share a little bit about what that journey was like, from cutting edge technologies all the way to this new book.
Well, it's nice to talk to someone who's been there. A journey is a good word. So I wrote a couple of books in the 1980s that nobody read.
Depressing.
Studies in Bad Timing. I think my mother bought a lot of the copies. Anyway, 82, I was arguing that computers would not only be used by programmers, they'd be used by everybody connected to a vast network of networks, and that they would become a communications tool, not just for data processing. And, as a management expert, one of the management experts in the world, you'd appreciate this, that the main reason that this was never going to happen, I was told, is because managers would never learn to type.
Yes.
So I used to be a champion for typing. Typing is fun. And
let's just, for our younger listeners, let's just put this in context. 1982, if memory serves me, was the year that the Apple computer first came out. It was either 81 or 82, like the first genuine home computer.
Yeah, the first Mac came out. The PC came out in 82.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this was a whole new thing. I mean, you were right at the cutting edge of that.
The Mac was later, but not a lot later. Anyway, Don, do I look like a secretary to you? I get this kind of thing. Uh-huh. And so it obviously wasn't about typing. You were messing with the power structures and gender roles and so on in the office. And but I started writing big books in the early 90s. Paradigm Shift was obviously a big book. And in 93 and 94, I wrote the first bestseller about the web. It was called The Digital Economy.
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember that. I think I still have a copy of that floating around here somewhere.
Well, I did a 20th anniversary edition 20 years later. Eric Schmidt wrote the foreword to that. And he was very kind, but we can talk about that later. It's interesting to reflect on, because I was what turned out to be right and what kind of didn't, that I was very upbeat about the web and the internet. It's going to change all these things, but I had a section on the dark side and things that could go wrong. I'm happy to go into that, but everything that could go wrong did go wrong. So, but then, there were a bunch of other big books over the years. I just posted on Instagram this morning. There's this whole meme about 2016. All the cool kids are saying, what happened in 2016? I have no idea why. So I just posted about 2016. But that was a good year for us. I wrote with my son Blockchain Revolution. It sold 500,000 copies in 20 languages. And, I did a TED Talk that was watched by 1 billion people. No, watched by 15 million people or so. And, and that blockchain book really got the whole party started, where everyone just thought it was about Bitcoin. And we said, no, there's an underlying internet of value here. We've had an internet of information for 2 decades, and now we're getting an internet of value, or anything of value, from money to securities, intellectual property, the data in our identities, music, art, votes, an asset of value that belongs to somebody. Anything of value can be stored, managed, transacted, communicated in a secure and private way, and where trust is achieved by cryptography and collaboration, not by an intermediary. So I digress. So that was kind of a big book too. And now, to finish this rather long story, it's happened once again. That about 2 years ago, we were thinking, wow, AI is going through this fundamental change and nobody knows anything about it. There's no book about it. But AI is changing from being a set of tools to becoming part of the human experience of us, Identic AI. So I wrote the book, and we'll see how many people read it. I'd love it if it were a blockchain revolution. It got to #2 on all books on Amazon.
Wow.
Damn you, Harry Potter.
That's wonderful. So for those of you that may be just joining us, I'm speaking with Don Tapscott, who's the co-author of this very cool book, You to the Power of Two. And it's about a concept he calls Identic AI. So if I could ask you to channel your inner Beatles for a minute, right? Yeah. You open the book by saying, got up, got out of bed, dragged a comb across my head, and sort of put people in what life would look like when we have Identic AI.
Well, yeah, and drag a comb across your head before you go downstairs to take a cup. A personalized agent has already scanned your health data, checked your schedule, flagged a traffic delay, curated and summarized the day's news. You wake up, reminds you of your sister's birthday, and suggests some gifts, and outlines a conference that it'll attend on your behalf. And by the time you reach the office, it's updated your agenda, it's drafted replies to emails, it's optimized a production schedule, tackled some customer complaints, and later on throughout the day, maybe you're driving. You have an infinite number of vice presidents, as Peter Diamandis, the founder of XPRIZE, said to us in an interview. And personally, it compares your monthly spending to long-term goals. It recommends a dietary tweak. Maybe it flags it's something suspicious in your healthcare, a mole or something like that, and gives you good news that house that you were bidding on, it was able to get the winning bid, and it's already got 3 designs that are consistent with your goals for the renovation. It's selected 3 potential contractors, and when you pick one, it'll manage the whole process, make sure they're on budget and on time. And this is an extension of you. It's a digital Rita with an IQ of 1,000, and it acts as your consigliere, your doctor that's been to every medical school in the world, your mentor and tutor, who's literally a freaking know-it-all, planner, counselor. It's going to learn your habits, anticipate your needs, and hopefully propelling you and your abilities forward. And it sounds kind of sci-fi, but it's happening right now. I'm giving a speech in a couple of weeks where on the stage will be me and Digital Dawn, who's going to help me answer questions.
Wow.
And all of these these tools that we all use separately are now coming together, become really an extension, not just of your data, but of your intellect.
So one of the, it's easy to see how eliminating frictions and inconveniences and making things go faster, how that would be very attractive. But it also raises some interesting questions like, well, how do you control this thing? And who knows if it's doing what your preferences are? And, if it's shaping what it's showing you, how do you know that that's actually the truth, right? I mean, it does raise some fascinating questions about
it sure does. And just to sort of, because we have a little time here, to give a little background to that answer. Our digital identities are becoming smart, which is why we call it Identic AI. There's a big challenge here. Well, if that's true, who's going to own digital Rita? Mark Zuckerberg. So the digital identity, and we'll explain this in the book, has gone through these three phases. First of all, it was about identification, okay? Knowing this really is the person who I'm dealing with, or I'm a legitimate person, or I have an idea that enables me to do things or buy things or do whatever.
And would that be like biometric identification?
Well, no, but it could be, but it could be anything. It could be just a password. Identity was about identification, and then identity took, over the last decade, took a much bigger step forward. It wasn't just about credentials, it was about broader data. So each of us, as we go through life, we leave a trail of digital crumbs that get collected into a mirror image of each of us. And a 95 book that didn't sell very well was called Who Knows? Safeguarding Your Privacy in the Networked Age. And we talked about the virtual you, this mirror image, and it may know more about you than you do, because you can't remember your exact location a year ago, or what you spent, or what medication you had, what diagnosis you had, what you got on a test, or what, if you're grading a student, what you said, or whatever. And we create this data, but it gets captured by this new species of business that we call digital conglomerates. And the Magnificent Seven, as they're called, that have a market value greater than Europe.
It's incredible.
Greater than the GDP of all the EU countries. And 7 companies that are over half of the stock exchange in the United States. So they capture this data. And that's a big problem. I referred to it back then when I started writing about this years ago as digital feudalism. Under the feudal system, you weren't a slave like the previous economy, which was ancient slavery, the Romans and Greeks and Aztecs and Chinese dynasties and so on. But also you weren't a wage laborer as you were under capitalism. You were tied to the land. And you had some land that you were assigned to. You grew a bunch of stuff or created produce, and then you gave most of it to the landlord, but you got to keep some of it. And we create this new asset class of the digital age, which is data. And but these digital conglomerates expropriate most of it, and you're left with a few digital cabbages. So, and
it's a great way of thinking about it.
And this is a big problem because, and it's not just about privacy, it means that you can't monetize data. They have and become the most valuable companies in the world. There's this iconoclastic guy named Jared Lanier who did some research. He said there's 1.5 billion people in the world who could double their income if they could monetize their data.
Really?
And you can't monetize it. You can't make decisions about it. For example, you might want to give away some data to science or anonymize your data. You might want to sell some of it or whatever. It means that you can't, all these data are in silos, so you can't aggregate this data for social purposes, like say to stop a pandemic. in its tracks. And it's all on central servers, and there's two types of those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. So it's not secure, and you're going to be left picking up the pieces.
That happened to me. That happened to me this past summer.
Well, thank you. Exhibit A, right here.
Right here, right?
And of course, it does undermine our privacy. You know, Rita, people say to me, "Well, Don, privacy's dead. Get over it. If you got nothing to hide, what's your problem?" This is stupidity. Privacy is the foundation of freedom, and this asset that we create that gets taken from us, we need to get it back so that we can manage it responsibly for ourselves and for our own lives and our families and so on. So that was a whole period of identity as data. And I've been arguing, well, no, that data ought to be self-sovereign. You create it. There are ways that you can own it. And that's the whole blockchain story came in. Well, now get ready for the next stage that we talk about in the book. Your identity, your digital identity is not just data. It has an IQ. It's your intelligence, your extension of your intelligence. And, you know, you think about, well, if you don't own that, if it's not self-sovereign, that's a really big problem. You know, call that the end of human agency and civilization. I mean, you take something like product placement. What was I watching? Just a film recently where someone had a Gatorade, okay? And I was thinking, good product placement. And well, imagine if, you know, Mark Zuckerberg can place products in the extension of your intelligence. Or how about, forget about products, how about ideas? Or how about political views? You know, so this is a big, big problem. So in the book, we argue that, yeah, everyone's bent out of shape about all these issues of AI, but they're not even talking about the most important one. They talk about hallucinations or you know, about a bias in AI and so on. These are all real problems. But the biggest issue is who's going to own you?
Right.
Who's going to own the digital version of you that, you know, sees you when you're sleeping and knows when you're awake, you know, probably knows if you've been bad or good too. So that's the big issue that we talk about. And we outline a set of solutions for that.
Well, I think, and I do agree, nobody's talking about that. I mean, the conversations I'm having with people about AI are all, oh, it's going to substitute a task. It's going to, you know, tweak a thing here or there. Or, oh, it's going to provide better customer service or whatever the thing is. But it's all kind of at the level of the tasks the thing can do.
Yes.
But it's not really talking about, well, who is it that it's using to, you know, what personality is it going to have? What, you know, who, if it gets embedded in our workflows that deeply, well, who is it, right? You know, what's the ghost in the machine? So I think this is a super critical issue.
I mean, there are a lot of things wrong with that point of view. One is it's not just an assistant. Okay? It's not. We're not Copilot. It's not what we're talking about. All Copilot is evolving, and eventually, I presume, from Microsoft will be this. But you know, it's an extension of you and everything that you do throughout the day. And for sure, there are big issues that have to do with the workforce and also about labor markets and jobs and too. But just like you're a leading management thinker and writer and educator and all the rest. Well, what is management? Well, you know, I was just talking to a friend of the Drucker Foundation. Of course, Peter Drucker, we've seen each other at these things. The inventor of modern management. It assumed a certain, not only a model of the corporation, which is the vehicle on how we orchestrate capability in society to create wealth, but it also assumes that you're managing a person, not a person with a superpower.
Right.
So again, Peter Diamandis says, Peter bought. He says, like, I have an infinite number of vice presidents. So I'm attending 5 conferences that day. And, you know, I'm just he describes he's doing all this stuff, and Peterbot does a lot of stuff better than he does. So just think about everything about management. Well, let's start with HR. You know, you recruit, you train, you compensate, you retain, you know, all the different aspects of HR. Well, recruiting somebody, what are you looking at? You're looking at their resume? Well, maybe you want to know what their superpower is like, because maybe someone brand new into the workforce can be way more capable than a seasoned executive with 20 years of experience. So what do you do? How do you train somebody like that? What do you do when they leave the company? You know, they've got all this, not just implicit knowledge, they have detailed information that we never had before. I mean, yeah, they walked me out of the office and I had to leave my files behind. Well, you're not going to do that anymore.
No.
The files, I don't know, where are they? Are they resident on a corporate computer, or are they self-sovereign to the individual? And
it raises the fascinating corporate level question of, you know, a lot of what companies have implicitly relied on for competitive differentiation is the fact that a lot of the information and practices within the boundaries of the firm are tacit. You know, the tacit, it's hard to copy that, right? Because it hasn't really been codified. But what AI is busy doing is codifying everything.
Yeah.
And so when a person leaves a company,
yeah.
All that knowledge they've been interacting with just comes with whatever their AI access is.
Yeah. And then you've got the whole, well, what does it mean for me, you know, as an employee or as a manager? You know, well, you know, this year, Identic AI will empower some employees and turn decisively negative for others. As personal agents augment employers with memory and reasoning, judgment and productivity rises because of that. You know, one professional can do the work of a lot. I mean, look at marketing. One person can research audiences, generate creative, test it, manage campaigns, analyze performance all in parallel. And so one person can increasingly do the work required by a whole team. So to compare to what you were talking about, AI assistance, which is a much more limited thing. So the result, and the economy needs fewer people to deliver the same output. You know, over the years, in fact, in the digital economy, 94, I said, I think this internet and the digital age is going to generate jobs. Joseph Schumpeter, you know, creative destruction. Technology or innovations come in, they smash the old institutions, and all these new ones get created. And that's always happened over the years. But I did say something could happen, that you get a wave of technology that's so fast and so powerful it would wipe out entire sectors of the workforce. Well, I'm coming to the conclusion that that's happening. So this raises some issues for an individual. You know, I was meeting with a young person just graduating last a couple of days ago, and I said to him, if I were you, I would spend every waking minute learning everything I could about AI. I'd be developing my own agentic agent. I'd be thinking about how that can help me succeed in the workforce. I'd be thinking about how do I manage that thing and all these other issues. So that's a huge thing at the level of the individual. But at the level of labor markets, this offers some big challenges. So how are we going to deal with that? I mean, in the book, we have a whole chapter giving our view on how we're going to deal with it. But these are big societal issues that we have to come to grips with.
They absolutely are. And, you know, the nature of employment is highly likely to be very different. I mean, right now we're seeing situations where the unit of value creation can very easily be a small team or even an individual. And
Sure.
the way that they organize can be, as you've said for years, you could easily set up a blockchain organizational structure where everybody knows what their contribution is and then people get paid accordingly on whatever the proceeds are. And you don't actually need a traditional organization to do that.
Yeah.
And that already exists. I mean, there are entities out there that are perfectly happily marking away this. But when that becomes the norm, then a lot of our taken for granted assumptions about how we organize, like what does unemployment mean in a gig work world? Do we even know? What are we going to do about healthcare if their employers are not shouldering that cost anymore? I mean, I think there's just huge issues that we haven't really grappled with.
Yeah. Well, for sure, unemployment. Sorry, just before that, you made a really good point. What was it? I wanted to comment on.
The units of value creation being smaller.
Thank you. So, again, 1994, I said, if you want to understand the internet, I think there's an economist that can help us best understand that. And his name is Ronald Coase.
Right.
And by the way, he never wrote about the internet.
No.
We interviewed him, and he said,
"Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm not interested in that." But his 1927 theory of the firm, that he asked this deceptively simple question: why do we have firms? He says, if Adam Smith is right, and the open market is the best mechanism for allocating goods and resources and materials and people and so on, money, why isn't everybody an individual contractor, at every step along the way in production? And he said the answer is, and he won a Nobel Prize for saying this, the answer is transaction costs. The cost, well, you know all this, but I'm telling you, viewers, audience, the cost of search, of finding all the right people or materials or money. If we had to do that for every single activity in the economy, that would be impractical. So we bring that into the corporation. The cost of coordination. Imagine you're trying to make a widget, and you have to get all these people who've never met each other and all these factories and everything working together. That would be prohibitive. And overall, the costs of establishing trust. And the internet started to drop those transaction costs. For Cisco, which for a while was the most valuable company in the world, they had this business model where they would focus on what we do best and partner to do the rest. And they created a business ecosystem, and a business model conferred competitive differentiation to them. Now, that's not to say that vertical integration is always a bad idea. It's not. But the internet had that initial impact. Then we come along, we have blockchain, where all of a sudden these transaction costs in the open market are if not demolished, they're radically reduced. So the cost of coordination, where you can get people working together in a decentralized, autonomous organization.
Right.
They don't really know each other. They've never really met. There's no boss, but through the blockchain, they have ways of coordinating activities, and these have created some of the most valuable organizations in the world. A sad thing, I'm sitting here in Canada. One of those, the most valuable business ever created in Canada, was not, BlackBerry or Shopify or Nortel Networks or an oil company. It was Ethereum.
Really?
Yeah, and we created it here, and we drove it out of the country.
Huh. Oh, jeez.
Because of our legislation. So anyway, now, and a key to this is something called smart contracts that enable people in a decentralized way to work together. They're just contracts made out of software that self-execute, and they police themselves, and they have a bank in the contract, kind of. So they can execute payments. You do certain things, the payment happens. So that started to drop transaction costs, and the boundaries of the firm became more porous. Well, now what happens when that smart contract gets really smart? You bring in AI. So I was speaking at a conference in Berlin about Identic AI, and there was a big debate. Well, what's more important to AI? Is blockchain's important to AI, or AI is important to blockchain? And I dated myself by saying, anybody heard of a song called "Love and Marriage Goes Together"? A horse and carriage, and so AI is going to juice up the power, and it is already doing that with smart contracts. So I've been talking about this decentralized models of things, but I'm pretty convinced that this next wave of AI, if we don't blow ourselves up as a civilization, that will be, a new and very different model of the firm as we've known it.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. There are some people who argue that employment itself, between AI and humanoids, is just not going to be the way that we think about it currently.
Well, I would agree with that. Now, again, I'm not a futurist. I think the future is not something to be predicted; it's something to be achieved. But you've got Elon Musk, running around saying you're nuts if you're going to medical school, because not even surgery. These are all going to be done by AI and humanoid robots within the next 15 to 20 years. So, we sent all kids to university. And we said, study something useful. Don't
coding. You got to study coding.
Yeah, exactly. Don't even think about a useless degree like the humanities or liberal arts or something like that. Well, of course, that was bad advice. And according to Eric Schmidt, most programming will be done by AI at the end of this year.
Wow.
So what are we going to do? Well, again, to go to Elon Musk, and just to be clear, I'm not a fan, but he says that, well, guaranteed annual income, we're not going to need that. It'll be a guaranteed high income. And well, that's a sort of wonderful vision, but maybe we can be forgiven for being a little skeptical coming from the guy who's currently leading the chopping of the social safety net, rather than its enhancement. Of course, there's no plan or anything to sort of implement that. So to me, and again, I've been on this for a long time, but we talk about it a fair bit in the book. We are going to need a new social contract in society, because even if we can somehow implement a new regime, because there's lots of wealth, but there aren't jobs, we can implement a guaranteed high income. There's still a lot of stuff to be done. It's just there isn't a job. There's not a market mechanism to pay people to do things. So, but we still need a lot done. There are a lot of problems in society. And furthermore, people, to me, get satisfaction out of being productive, of doing.
Well, yeah, and it gets to the question of where you get your meaning from. Like, how do you establish your own self-worth? And certainly in America, we've taken this to an extreme. It's so tightly connected to what you do for a living that I think we've kind of over-indexed on that. But there's a lot of evidence that many of the other entities that used to create belonging and a sense of activity and whatnot, books like Bowling Alone, right? Where the people are just isolated, they're not participating in the community anymore. And there's a lot of speculation as to why, but you could envision a world where if you had these, identic agents, where you're spending the bulk of your time with the thing that isn't even a person.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then you intersect that with demographics and growing up. and so on. You know, I wrote the book Growing Up Digital in '97. That was a big book. Well, and like this is the first time in human history when children are an authority about something really important. You know, I was an authority on model trains when I was 11. And I said back then, the 11-year-old at the breakfast table is an authority on the digital revolution. It's changing every institution in society. So it wasn't a generation gap, you know, big differences between kids and parents that existed for me growing up in the.
So I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Carlota Perez,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I take some comfort from her work in that if we can get our act together, and I think your argument about who owns these things is a huge and important piece of this, that we could set ourselves up for a new golden age, you know, where people feel that government, you know, business, society are working in each other's best interests. But, you know, you have to get it right. And I know there's a specific set of issues that you raised when you talked about, you know, who owns the digital you, and that we need to really rethink what the tech stack is around that.
Right.
But that's going to have to be designed. I mean, that's just, the tech companies are not just going to let us do that unless some external force says they've got to.
Yeah. So fundamental issue. Well, there's the social contract that we sort of touched on, and a social contract is the way you described it: government, business, citizens, civil society, the deal that they have. And you know, when we went from the agrarian age to the industrial age, we built a new social contract. We figured out factory workers are going to have to be literate, so we created a public education system. Figured people live in cities. They're going to need a social safety net. Figured out one oil company shouldn't own all the oil, so we created anti-monopoly legislation. We haven't done any of that for this new thing. So, but on the issue, and this is a big issue in the book too, like how are we going to achieve a self-sovereign Identic AI? You've got these juggernauts that control AI, and people look at me like, Don, give me a break. How's that even technically feasible? Well, it's both feasible and it's also achievable from a social and economic point of view. So on the feasibility, we need to rebuild the AI stack around a decentralized model. And there are 5 layers to that. I won't go through them now. We talk about them in the book: physical infrastructure, language models, the data, the, you know, the applications, and so on. And this is something which technically is absolutely achievable. You know, the level of the hardware, it's called DPIN, Decentralized Physical Infrastructure. But now the interplanetary file system, there's millions of computers all around the world where you store, and it's blockchain based, you store some files on your computer and you get compensated for it with some tokens. Well, if we can store stuff on people's computers, we can have the processing of AI be, in part at least, a highly decentralized thing. But also, how would we ever get to something like this? I'll tell you, one of the advantages of having been around, being old, one of the few advantages is that I've been there and I've done that. And I can describe 5 times in my life where people said to me, oh, the technology juggernauts, they're never going to, we'll let go of this. I mean, it started with the bunch in the 70s, Burroughs, Univac, NCR, Control Data, and Honeywell. Well, they're all gone, the mainframe companies. IBM was the only one that got through there. Then there were the mini computer companies.
Wang.
Yeah, 4 days. Like we could name a dozen of them here. And the biggest one being the Digital Equipment Corporation, which was the most valuable company in the world. Bigger than IBM in terms of market cap. And mini computers dominate the world. And then this thing called a PC came along, and Ken Olsen, the CEO of DEC, famously said, why would anyone want a personal computer in their home? and we'll chalk that one up to famous last words.
Right.
Tech is gone. Well, they're all gone. HP was the only one that got through that, and they figured out that we're not a mini computer company. I don't know what they are, printer company or something. So, and then you had the rise of the internet and all the .coms. It's a funny story. It's a little bit out of school, but in 2007 at Davos, I'd written Wikinomics, and it was a really big book.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark Zuckerberg, everyone said, he's trying to find you, he's trying to meet you. And my secretary's like, you got to meet with this guy. And I'm, great, okay. So Facebook had like 30 million users. And he wanted me to autograph his book. And I'm like, what's wrong with this picture? He created a network with 30 million people. I wrote a book. But the other thing is, on the front page of the book was MySpace, along with Linux and the Human Genome and a bunch of other these mass collaborations. And he said, would you think about maybe putting Facebook? Because I think we're going to be bigger than they are.
Huh.
And so, well, that was MySpace, and the .coms, they all fell. Ultimately, that in the earlier period, they fell by the wayside. And then, the blockchain came out. And in this case, it wasn't the tech, well, it was to a certain extent. The big technology companies that had difficulty figuring that, like Google fought it, and all these companies fought against that. But it was also broader forces, like the entire banking industry. I did a session at Davos that year. No, this is later, in 2016. The book came out with a bunch of CEOs of the biggest banks in the world. And they were not a happy group here listening to me. The only one who was great was Dan Schulman from PayPal. And he was like, Don, don't listen to these guys. They're a bunch of morons. And, but Don, what's the use case? The banking system works fine the way it is, And I'm like, guys, I think this is really going to be in the interest of customers. And because of that, it's inevitable. So, and that now, of course, they're all falling over backwards trying to get on board, although they're still fighting big parts of it. Like the entire banking industry is still kind of fighting against stablecoins. And Rita, just today, when this is being recorded, published soon, the BRI released a major paper on stablecoins, a huge results of a big research project where we dig into this deep and talk about the empire fighting back and why this is, dealing with all the various issues. You can go to blockchainresearchinstitute.org, and the paper's free. It's publicly available. But anyway, I digress. These are long-standing stories of how great juggernauts that controlled everything had difficulty as the leaders of the old paradigm embracing the new.
Right.
And so can this happen? I don't know, but it's got to happen. So I'm building a movement. This book, I've never used the term manifesto before, but it's a manifesto for a movement to get self-sovereignty over our digital future. And this is in the time that I have left as a person writing and trying to be influential. This is my big mission.
I think that's amazing. And this time has gone so quickly. So to me, what's needed to make this real is people like you getting involved in it. And then, in the post-World War II era, there was this thing called the Committee on Economic Development, in which business came together with government and with civil society and with the science community and invented the whole post-World War II order, which, it has its problems, but it worked pretty well. You know, the Bretton Woods Agreement, the Marshall Plan, the whole thing, because they didn't want to repeat the mistakes of World War One. And I think we're at one of those moments again. And I'm really pleased that you wrote the book, and I'm delighted that this is something you're putting energy into. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's always great to chat with you.
Indeed. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.